I recently spent a week with the new Model 3. As someone who owned one of the pre-refreshed cars, I wanted to find out, is the new version worth trading up to? Or if you're looking at owning a Model 3 for the first time, should you just save some money and buy it used? Exterior. Let's start off by quickly touching on the exterior changes. Design is always subjective, but in my opinion, the car is much sleeker and more modern looking. The new front end is a welcome evolution over the aging styling of the older cars. The LED headlights and taillights are fittingly sharper. The same goes for the 18-inch aero wheels, the option I went with on my Model 3. The covers have been greatly improved visually, and now you don't have to sacrifice form over function. Everything else is essentially the same, except of course, the ultrasonic sensors are now gone. I'll get into that later. The front trunk has shrunk a little bit to fit the new heat pump underneath it. I also don't like that Tesla didn't add a power open and close option here. It explains why so many Tesla owners, including myself, always skip using it. However, the rear cargo area did get a little bit of an upgrade. It is now power operated, and the trunk is lined with the carpet-like material, which both feels nice and probably helps with sound dampening. Exterior build quality. One area Tesla has traditionally struggled with is the front hood alignment. I'm sad to report that even this Model 3 suffers from this problem, as we can see that the gap on the driver's side isn't uniform with the passengers. It doesn't seem to cause a functional issue, but the hood does stick up on the driver's side some, and because it's a relatively thin piece of aluminum, you have to be very careful how you close it. As for the rest of the front, the gaps around the headlights and fenders look great, much improved over the old design. Another common issue with previous Teslas has been the door alignment, including the trim pieces. On this particular car, it looks like they nailed the black trim, but the same can't be said about the door gaps themselves, as the rear driver's side door sticks out compared to where it should be. On the flip side, the door handles are now flush, which hasn't always been the case. Heading to the back, there are a handful of common issues that Tesla owners had to deal with in the olden days. Let's take a look and see what they've done with it. The redesign included putting the taillights on the liftgate versus splitting it with the body. Along with this comes a new seal design which prevents water from leaking into them, a problem that many of us probably faced. But what about the gaps? Well, right off the bat, I can tell you those are looking a lot better, including the hinge area. And you'd probably need a special tool to measure a millimeter off here or there, something most owners couldn't care less about. It's not all positive back here though. After popping open the trunk, I immediately noticed the gap between the body and the panels on the driver's side is much larger than it is on the other side. Yet another obvious build mistake is how the rubber sealing was placed around the cargo opening. You can clearly see the left side has a massive gap, while the right side is set correctly. Interior. Tesla supposedly did a lot of work to improve noise, vibration, and harshness. For starters, all 4 windows are now dual paned, whereas my old 2020 Model 3, none of them were. On top of this, the other glass on the car has also been treated, which is now referred to as Tesla acoustic glass. Does it make any difference? You might want to stay tuned to the results of my cabin noise test coming up later in the video. Like the rest of the interior, the doors themselves are completely redesigned with nicer looking and feeling soft touch material, even at the bottom. But the best part is the carpet-lined door pockets, which eliminates the rattling you used to get when you put things down here. Again, I'm not going to cover every new feature in the interior, but here are the highlights. The seats themselves are as comfortable as ever, and the new cooling feature is decently strong and absolutely makes a difference in the heat. Speaking of making a difference, let's talk about the new center console, which rids us of those cheap-looking, highly reflective, and hard-to-clean gloss black parts from before. I hated the old one so much that I just bought an aftermarket vinyl cover that matched the wood accent piece to wrap it with. There's still plenty of storage, and I really love the large armrest that's decently padded. Another thing Tesla removed are the stalks, which I'm going to get to later in the video, but it does help clean up the aesthetic if nothing else. Moving up to the dashboard, it's all new and certainly improved. Gone are the old white plastic and wood trim pieces, along with that silver accent bar that reflected the sun in your eyes constantly. And I guess I'll go ahead and mention the ambient lighting. I think it adds a nice futuristic touch to any vehicle. However, there is one big problem with the way Tesla has implemented this ambient lighting. Not only can it be distracting at night because it's on top of the dashboard in your line of sight directly, but the bigger issue is, during the daytime when you're driving, the silver part of the trim reflects directly onto the windshield. To me, it looks like one gigantic crack, and I have to constantly remind myself that no, the windshield isn't cracked. This is a terrible way to implement this. They should have put it in the dash or below it like many other cars, including my ID4 for example. Heading to the back row, there's a couple of things to mention here. First, Tesla has angled the seat so your passengers should have better thigh support, which might be helpful for longer road trips. And they also added a screen, which is nice for your passengers to have access to climate controls. They can also watch media like YouTube, though unless your passengers are small children, they're probably going to have some pretty sore necks if they look at this screen for too long. Oh, one more note on the climate controls. Tesla finally changed the HVAC system controls where the front passenger can turn their vent off completely. I cannot tell you how many arguments this started when I first bought my original Model 3. This might be worth the upgrade alone to save some marriages. I must say, I appreciate what Tesla has done with the interior. It feels like a car at a completely different price point altogether. Interior build quality. I'll start by covering what are, in my opinion, the most common and obvious problems in the older models. Getting the pillar trim to connect together without gaps, or eventually breaking off the body frame. Here's an example from another Tesla of a typical but incorrect interior trim gap. The previous trim design was flimsy and used weak clips that would break off, which would cause the trim to come apart. I had this fixed in my own Model 3 a couple of times. Though they look very similar, Tesla has certainly made some upgrades here, as the B-pillar trim is much more stable, and all of the different trim pieces actually fit together the way that they should. The headliner, which previously caused rattles because it was weakly attached, also has a much stronger hold now. Oh, and it seems Tesla has finally gotten the rubber trim around the doors figured out too. They weren't applied correctly in a couple of my older cars, which had to be fixed at a service center. In the previous generation, the wood veneer or the plastic accent piece never seemed to fit quite right, and the IP seemed to cause some rattles. Now, with less parts, things fit much better. This includes the glove box, which was always out of place in every other Model 3 or Y I've been in. In fact, throughout this interior, nearly everything is built to a better standard than before, but it's not perfect. The new center console has a plastic squeak to it that you can slightly hear on rough roads if the cover is fully retracted. Though the armrest is solid and doesn't seem to wobble or make noise. The other concern is the vinyl material that Tesla uses. Let's look at the seats for example. I'm not sure what it is about Tesla's vinyl that makes it more susceptible to wear, but that's been the experience that I've had in every one of them that I've owned. This car is only a couple of months old, and you can already see some wrinkles forming in the vinyl seats, along with some stitching that's starting to fray. Look at the damage to the vinyl on this year-old Model S that I took out for a drive. Is this what's in store for this Model 3 soon? You could say all vinyl is like that, but it's not. I have a 3.5-year-old ID4 with 60,000 miles on it, and the seats look almost exactly the same way they did when I drove it off the lot. I'd just like to see Tesla make their vinyl more durable. That includes the steering wheel. If you get chemicals like sunscreen or hair products on your hand, they can really degrade it quite quickly. Moving over to the doors, the panels seem to sit very tight on the frame, which yes, some including myself had problems with previously, and they finally make that solid thunk sound when you close them. Gone are the days of the rattling glass. All in all, while I love what Tesla has done with the interior design, including the fact that the parts fit together much better than before, my biggest concern is whether or not these materials can hold up for 5 or 10 years. Software and FSD. Now let's talk a little bit about the software. Tesla does a really good job at keeping the older cars updated with the newer ones, so I'm not going to spend extensive time on this. The screen itself is slightly updated with smaller bezels. Yes, it looks nicer, but I wouldn't say it's a massive difference. Teslas have always had an iPad-like experience, but the AMD Ryzen chip has corrected a lot of problems. For example, the internet browser used to be really slow, completely unusable actually. Media apps like Netflix and Hulu took forever to load and often crashed. Here the media apps are buttery smooth, and I have to say I love Tesla OS. I love how well voice commands work, how easy it is to navigate on a road trip, how you can quickly play your favorite song on this amazing sound system, but older cars do hold their own here on some of these things too. The other thing Tesla is famous for is their full self-driving software, which I got to test out for the very first time in this car. I had enhanced autopilot on my old Model 3, both with radar and ultrasonic sensors, so I wanted to compare the two really quickly. I tried FSD on a 30-mile trip with mixed highway and city driving, and I had it in assertive mode. Let's start with the good. I didn't have to disengage at all across the entire trip. That's mind-blowing in and of itself. There were a few hiccups though. Sometimes it waited a bit too long to change lanes. I had an unexplainable phantom braking event, something my older car dealt with too. Finally, there was this one strange segment where the car inexplicably decided to drive around 10 miles below the speed limit for seemingly no reason. Overall, it was much smoother on the highways compared to enhanced autopilot, and I always felt safe, though I would never take my eyes off of the road. I probably wouldn't use it for city driving because there's just too much going on, I don't trust the other drivers, and at this point it's just not worth the risk to me personally. FSD also comes with auto park, which I did use quite a lot, and it worked well each time, though it will cut turns short if it doesn't see any objects in its view. This would be very helpful for backing up into those Tesla supercharger stalls. But would I buy FSD or recommend that you buy it? I could see myself subscribing to that monthly membership and using it on long road trips. I think that would definitely help reduce fatigue. Going back to parking though, let's talk about those ultrasonic sensors, or lack thereof. As you already probably know, Tesla replaced the ultrasonic sensors with Tesla Vision, but the current software doesn't display distance measurements, opting for loose visuals and a red line that that pops up as you get close to something. Is Tesla Vision an improvement? Not at this point, because the cameras can get blocked quite easily compared to the sensors, and you might find yourself with more warnings more often than before. With that said, it's nowhere near as bad as I expected it to be, and Tesla is clearly committed to improving it. So I would consider it a net neutral, and it's not like the old system didn't have its own problems anyway. Driving experience. Truth be told, there's not a Tesla on the market that's not fun to drive, and the Model 3 has to rank up there with any car of any kind with how big of a smile it can put on your face. If you own one, you already know that. So what's different? Let's start with the downsides first. You've probably heard by now there are 3 ways to shift a new Tesla since the stock is gone. You can use Tesla Auto Shift, which predicts which direction you want to go. That can be quite reliable, but certainly not always accurate. You can also use the touchscreen, which works fine, assuming the car correctly reads your input. You could also use the backup controls, which are in the headliner, but I don't think anyone really does that. I'll just say it up front, the stocks were better. One positive though, I don't actually miss the turn signal stock, because it was too finicky anyway. I much prefer tapping the turn signal buttons on the steering wheel. That ends the negatives from my perspective, so let's talk about some things that are better. I used to complain that Teslas lacked a blind spot monitoring indicator, but they added a small light in the speaker grille. Of course, the software has been updated, so now when you activate a turn signal, it'll show the side repeater camera feed, which is better anyway. And I should mention that all of the cameras are light years ahead of my old car. Not only are the colors more accurate with the far better resolution, but the feed doesn't seem to lag the way that it used to. But let's get into the 2 biggest things that really matter. Tesla has done a lot of work on the suspension, and wow, coming from the old design, you can really feel it. It has more give to it, though it's not bouncy at all. Cabin noise. With poor build quality comes undesirable noises like rattles. I've put a few hundred miles on this car, and here are my takeaways. No, this Model 3 wasn't completely rattle-free, but the only one I heard was fairly inconsistent and required some pretty rough pavement to show up. Probably my favorite improvement is the cabin noise. Yes, Tesla back in the day had a pretty bad reputation for how loud their cars were. I later tested the cabin noise using a decibel reader and got just above 67 dB, going around 70 miles per hour with an 8 to 10 mile per hour headwind in front of me. That's luxury car quiet. Combine that with the thumping sound system, which is the best among the competition, and you don't really hear a whole lot of other noise when you're driving. No longer can someone complain that the Model 3 is a loud car, because objectively it isn't anymore. Real world range. This car has about 5,000 miles on it, and it reports it's been using 265 watt-hours per mile, or about 3.8 miles per kilowatt-hour. That's 8 to 9% less efficient than it's rated to be. Granted, these numbers are mostly from summer driving, where the weather's been over 90 degrees, so you can assume the AC's been blasted every day. With the long-range all-wheel drive version, which this car is, you can still expect to have more than 325 miles of usable range for daily driving, and probably closer to 300 miles on the highway in fair weather conditions. That's around 50 miles, if not more, than my old Model 3 would get. While unfortunately I didn't get to test it out myself, I do know that the heat pump can make a pretty big difference in the wintertime as well. Be sure to click the like button to help others learn more about the Model 3, and consider subscribing if you want more EV tips, reviews, and ownership content. Thanks for watching.